Welcome back to the DeCesare Group Podcast. I'm your host, Jim DeCesare, and I'm glad you're here. You know, the TDG Podcast is now on YouTube, which is second only to Facebook as the top social media platform of 2024. We hope you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as anywhere you listen to podcasts to receive notifications every Monday when our new episodes drop. I'm excited to welcome this week's guest, who is no stranger to the podcast. He is our first three-peater, but he's here in a different capacity. I'm talking about Greg Coker. He was recently appointed president and CEO of the Kentucky Center for Leadership. Greg is a former corporate executive and government regulator, an accomplished author, workshop leader, and nationally known speaker. He brings a wealth of experience to the Kentucky Center for Leadership, which is a nonprofit that was established in 2020. Greg tells us about the future plans of the center to reach an even broader audience and elevate leadership throughout the state. Here's my conversation with Greg Coker. Greg,
Jim,
welcome back to the DeCesare Group Podcast. You're our first three-peater.
I'm honored.
We're honored. And a lot of things have changed with you in the past few months. Congratulations on your new position. Tell us how the Kentucky Center for Leadership came about and how you got into this role.
Well, thanks, Jim, for having me back. I'm honored and humbled and appreciative to be a part. I listen to your podcast usually every Tuesday or Wednesday night when I get back. The Kentucky Center for Leadership sort of come full circle. In 1982, when I graduated from Franklin Simpson High School, I attended Western Kentucky University, and the first professor I see at Fine Arts is Dr. Randy Capps. And Dr. Capps was teaching a class on, I think, speech communication at the time, and took speech communication from Dr. Randy Capps and several other classes. Dr. Cecile Garman, Dr. Carl Kell, a lot of folks are still around, and graduated from undergraduate. Went out into sales for a couple of years, found out pretty quickly I was a great salesperson. I sold my car and my stereo, couldn't sell anything for the company I was working for. And Randy Capps called and said, it's time for you to come back home. And I said, what does that mean? He said, come to graduate school. Took the GRE, and he called me in a couple of weeks. He said, good news, bad news. Good news, you know me. Bad news, your test results suggest you shouldn't be in graduate school, and maybe not even had an undergraduate degree. But because you know me, you're in, come to grad school. So did that, spent a couple years doing that, and then some 25, almost 30 years later, Randy Capps had started a successful consulting business, but he also started an organization called the Kentucky Center for Leadership, a nonprofit organization with a focus on community leadership. And a couple years ago, Dr. Capps passed away the way I hope I pass away at 85, 86, hopefully 95, 96 for me, but he was doing what he loved doing and reared back in his chair and had a heart attack and went to go see the Lord. Now he's doing leadership training up in heaven, I'm sure. So that was a couple of years ago, and I was asked to do a strategic plan for the Kentucky Center for Leadership, and started doing that and put some meat on the bones. And that was about 8 or 9 months ago. And then after I put the meat on the bones on the plan, the board said, Greg, you've done this for a long time. Would you be open to sort of leading the charge for us? And that's what I've done, and I'm humbled and honored and, again, deeply appreciative to have that role.
That's awesome. So are you so you're now the executive director, is that right?
President, CEO.
President, CEO of the Kentucky Center for Leadership. Now, are you still doing Greg Coker development?
I am.
Okay.
I am. I travel 8 states, and my goal, quite frankly, is the way we've described the Kentucky Center for Leadership as a moonshot. And it is a moonshot because when we did our strategic plan, we've got a great board, very engaged, and our mission, of course, a lofty mission to serve as a catalyst for next-level leadership growth while inspiring Kentuckians to achieve a better Commonwealth. And with that kind of mission and a vision of being the premier leadership development and experience in Kentucky, wow, our whole board said, if we're going to do this, let's do it right.
Yeah.
And it's going to take probably a year, 2 or 3 to get it off the ground. We're calling it a moonshot, and that rocket's not going to take off overnight. We need some rocket fuel, and we have some, thanks to support of board members and community leaders. And So my goal, quite frankly, is at almost 60 years old to get this rocket off the ground, and hopefully in a couple, 2 or 3 years, I can do more work in Bowling Green, South Central Kentucky, and Kentucky versus having to travel 7 or 8 states, which I enjoy doing now. But at some point, I'm probably not going to put that many miles on my car.
The more grandkids that come into the picture, the less you want to travel.
That's an excellent point. We've got 2 and 1 on the way, and sleeping in my own bed here in Bowling Green is a novel idea, but I'd like to be able to do that, and I know we will do it. My goal is quite simply just to get it off the ground, and quite frankly, Jim, what inspired me, I know it inspires you too, is the old Steve Jobs story of Apple Computer being a young organization at the time, and no one had heard of Apple, and he needed a president, CEO to get it off the ground, and asked John Scully. At the time was with PepsiCo, and John Scully said no for the many reasons I said no. I've got 8 states I'm traveling to, I've got all this going on, and Steve Jobs looked at John Scully. He said, at the end of your life, John, would you like folks to have remembered you as selling colored sugared water or making machines that change the world? And the board never asked me that question that bluntly, but again, I'm somewhat in the probably summer, early fall of my career or life, and you start looking at mortality, and that's what the philosophers told us to do is look at the end of your life. What do you want it to have meant? And sure, I could look back and say, I've lobbied the legislature and met some pretty cool people and done podcasts with you and written a few books, but at the end of my life, quite frankly, I would be more happy and joyful if I could look back and others could say, Greg maybe had a small part of elevating leadership in South Central Kentucky. Yeah. And that's quite frankly why I couldn't afford to say no to an opportunity to help a little bit. Our board doing great work. We have a legacy of former programming, and so all I'm doing is just introducing the organization.
Yeah, let's talk about your board. Who makes up the Kentucky Center for Leadership? It's not just Greg Coker.
No, not at all. I'm a board member.
In fact, you're the new guy.
Well, I am the new guy. When I was approached by Craig Browning and Jim Flynn, both very close friends and great leaders, Gary Ransdale, Kristen Bell, Tony Pulaski, a lot of other ones that I if I started naming them all, I'd forget them. But we've got a great board. When they approach me, they simply ask, would you help us? You've developed a successful consulting career, and the way I define successful consulting career, it pays the mortgage and puts food on at home. But I have been blessed to be able to do work with a lot of different organizations, and I do quite a bit of work here in Bowling Green and in Kentucky. But quite frankly, I do a lot more out of state, and so our board very engaged. We're a nonprofit. We work with governments, or our vision is to work with local communities, work with elected officials, work with governments. But a key partner, a key stakeholder in this is the private sector. So we're going to work with another key sector. You had Greg Farrell on your podcast last week, is faith-based community. Yeah, that's leadership, and our mission is next level leadership. A lot of folks would say, well, there's other organizations doing management training and supervisory skills, and that's great. A lot of organizations here do that, and we applaud that. We want to be a partner in and a complement to those programs. So what we set out in our strategic plan is, who are we? What do we do? And what we came up with is next level leadership. What does that mean? That means that if you're a principal here in a local high school, and all of a sudden you've now find yourself being in the central office as a vice president or as a superintendent, that requires a different type of leadership. I have a client here locally and met this morning with a gentleman that I coach. He went from being someone that was responsible for IT to now being the chief information officer. Right. That requires a different skill, executive presence, and as a former legislator, you can go from being an elected official, all of a sudden now you're committee chair. Yeah. And you were a committee chair, and I remember seeing you. It's a different leadership, going from committee chair to caucus chair to Senate pro tem. Last week you were there. We had Senators David Givens and Senator Gerald Neal, both in leadership. They have a different presence, as they should, than they did when they were legislators or committee chairs.
It's all about the people you're leading. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Who are you leading, and how are you going to lead them?
Exactly, because John Maxwell said it best. People follow the visionary before they follow the vision.
Right.
And you've had experience, I have too, especially in the legislature and private business, where you had a great vision, a great mission, but that leader, for whatever she or he did or didn't do, people just didn't follow them. And we find ourselves now with that in politics on both sides of the aisle. People have to follow the visionary before they follow the vision. And again, I'm a registered independent, so I can make fun of both parties. But right now, on both sides of the aisle, we need a visionary. We need a Reagan. We need a John F. Kennedy. We need on both sides. We need someone that people can gravitate toward.
Yeah.
And that's what our vision is, our mission is at the Kentucky Center for Leadership, is to be a catalyst for next level leadership. And that's what we're charged, and it's what we're pumped up and excited to do.
Yeah, it sounds like, so you all came up with your game plan and next level leadership. Talk about the criteria for all your programming to create an experience.
An experience. I'm glad you said that, because I've always felt that people will pay for an experience.
Oh, yeah.
They're not going to pay for a $100 meal, but they'll pay for an experience, and the meal comes with it. Mm-hmm. And the example I use here locally, we've got Rafferty's. That's an experience for me. It started in 82, 83 or before. I was in college.
Yeah.
We went to Rafferty's, now Montana Grill, now Tony's. Tons of, we've got Pub Novo. I could go on and on. I pay for the experience. We were at Vincenzo's in Louisville, Kentucky a couple of months ago. Some clients of mine took a couple of 3 or 4 of us out. I didn't pay for the meal, but I know the meal was probably a couple $100.
Yeah.
But Vincenzo comes out, and he literally starts crying. He goes, I was in the hospital. They didn't think I was going to make it. I'm 85 plus years old. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you all. And I started crying with him.
Yeah.
And I looked at my buddy. I said, that's what we pay for, is the experience. So now moving forward with leadership is you can go to a lot of programming. The luncheon we had a couple 3 or 4 weeks ago, you had Senators Gerald Neal and Senators David Givens. And Millie McIntosh from Franklin, Kentucky stood up and asked a question about unconscious bias, which is a great book, and it talks about not being prejudiced, or it talks about all of us have an unconscious bias in our mind, whether it's against country people or city people or northerners or southerners. Yeah. We've all got it. It's natural. I've got to monitor it. And she stood up and asked the question, how do you deal with that? And it was in such a loving way that she asked the question. There was trust. And if there's trust, you can give people feedback, and they'll be open to evaluate their thoughts and their thinking. She asked the question in a beautiful way, and Senators Gerald Neal and Senators David Givens started a discussion. And Senator Gerald Neal talked about a KKK member coming to his law practice. Now, here's a black senator, a black lawyer, who has a KKK member coming to ask if Gerald Neal would represent them. And Gerald Neal discloses, I had to get over my unconscious biasness. It was such a beautiful discussion, and my criteria, and I've asked Greg Farrell if he wouldn't mind me sharing this. I took a picture of Greg Farrell, and Greg Farrell, your guest last week, was on the edge of his seat. Mm-hmm. His cell phone was on the floor. He was the most engaged person in that discussion. And I looked at a couple board members, and I pointed at Greg, and I said, that's what we have to do. When people come to our programming, it has to be an experience. And I've conducted so many programs in the past. Shame on me. That was more of a program. I got my leadership development material out of the way, but it quite frankly was an experience. And now I look back, it was no surprise why they didn't call me back. So our criterion is the Greg Farrell sitting on the edge of his seat, and everybody else in South Central Kentucky is the experience.
I like the way you said that he was fully engaged, yet he never said a word.
Never said a word.
But you could tell by his body language and the way he was comprehending and taking in everything that was being said. And you know, I was there, and Gerald Neal's story was, I mean, we were all like, wow. Mm-hmm. And ended up being friends with that guy to a certain point, to where the guy, it came to that time where he could no longer be associated with Gerald Neal for whatever reason.
Well, it's your friend, your friends. Exactly. And we've all been in that situation where
it's like in Grease when John Travolta is hanging out. They're like, hey, baby, it's cool. You know what I'm talking about.
Exactly. Exactly. Well,
exactly
we've all, one of my favorite quotes is, "You're the average of the 6 people you hang out with."
Yeah.
Well, if I'm not careful, I hang out with those 4 or 5 friends of mine, and they're good people. I may went to school with them. I've worked with them. They're good people. But if they have those not only unconscious biasness, if they have overt biasness, if they have overt prejudices, I'm the average of the 6 of those. So the more I hang out with folks like Senator Gerald Neal and Jim DeCesare and a lot of folks, you and I in the book club, we've talked about 100,000 different times, I want to be the average of the 6 people like you and folks that I hang out with. And in leadership, it's no different. And that's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to create experiences with a group of next level leaders in a room, in a training program, where you look around and go, I want to be like her. If I could hang out with her or him, and on faith-based, not only Greg, Steve Ayers, and tons of other ministers here in town, that's leadership. That's why people are flocking to those churches in faith-based leadership, is because they've created a culture. They lead. They get people engaged. So again, we want to serve government, communities, faith-based, private sector, etc. As long as it's next level leadership, that's what we want to be a part of.
So how do you see the Kentucky Center for Leadership collaborating with others who provide leadership training?
Great question. The first thing I did is, after we left the strategic planning session, is I went to go meet with the Bowling Green Chamber of Commerce. Meredith and Ron and Sandra Baker, and oh my gosh, I could go on forever, the great team they have down there. I wanted to meet with them, and I did, to be able to say, we want to complement what you're doing. We don't want to duplicate. We want to complement. I went to Owensboro. Stacey Eads Ellis. They have a very similar program in Owensboro, like the Kentucky Center for Leadership. I want to partner. We want to partner with Owensboro and Paducah. We don't want to step on their toes or whatever. We want to complement.
You don't want to duplicate. You want to collaborate.
Exactly. And Dr. Phil Neal, what they do at KCTCS and Sky, we want to help Dr. Neal be even more successful. He wants to help us. So the pie is so big on leadership development, and we all have a role to play, and that's what we want to do.
So you've got a new location. You're at the WKU Innovation Campus.
Oh my gosh!
Tell us about that, and tell us what kind of synergies happening there.
Well, oh my gosh, it's tons of synergy. Is when we had our strategic planning session, the name was and is the Kentucky Center for Leadership. And I do so much virtual, and we didn't have a location. I mean, we had a location, but it wasn't a training facility. And so I started thinking, like, well, maybe we should rename. Maybe if we don't have a facility, I won't say we're going to be virtual, but do we need to be the Kentucky Center for Leadership? And the board, of course, said, Greg, we are the Kentucky Center for Leadership. So I started meeting with key stakeholders. I met with the chamber and Dr. Phil Neal to collaborate, and I mentioned some other ones. And I went out to the innovation campus. Buddy Steen. I'd met Buddy, but he didn't remembered who I was. I called my friend Richie Sanders, and I said, "Can you give me Buddy's contact?" And he gave me Buddy's contact. Went out there and met with him. Buddy's telling me about the innovation campus. Gave me a tour, and almost the same time, Buddy looked at me, I looked at Buddy, and he was thinking, you need to be out here. And I was thinking, I need to be out here. And almost the same time, we both said it. And he said, let me show you where you could be. And showed me a facility there's nothing in there now. There's no chairs or tables. But that's the vision is we are now, as of 3 months, we are now located at the Innovation Campus. We've met with a couple companies, sort of a cooperative that would like to partner with the Kentucky Center for Leadership to let us be sort of their partner in training development to outfit that organization or outfit that facility, to have state-of-the-art media, programming, et cetera. So we are thrilled. And if your listeners audience, if they've not been at the Innovation Campus, you've got to do yourself a favor. Yeah. It's the most exciting. It's the Silicon Valley of Kentucky. It is an amazing place, and I can't tell you. I think it was more by luck on my part. I didn't have a lot of vision to be out there, but I know something when I see it in the board. I went back to the board and said, we can have this space for this much per month. It includes everything. And they looked at me and went, why are you asking that? And it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, yeah. And we've had Buddy and Sam Ford on the podcast to talk about the Innovation Campus. Of course, the DeCesare Group has space out there as well, and the smart collaboration space. So it's a wonderful facility, and it's where a lot of leaders are gravitating towards. And it's because of the work that Buddy, Sam, and the rest of the team out there are doing to bring in quality, not quantity, but quality organizations like the Kentucky Center for Leadership.
We were out there 2 days ago, and I saw 2 or 3 clients that I'm working with already out there, and they looked at me and they said, Greg, we didn't know you're going to be out here. And I'm like, I didn't know you're going to be out here. Every day that I'm out there, there's a new organization that's touring with Sam and with Buddy and Penny Hughes and all the Rob Wilson with the Technology Council.
He's been on the podcast.
There's so much synergy out there. It feels good. It just feels like Bowling Green. It feels like Kentucky as far as a good place, a spirit, but it feels like Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And there's people out there from Europe, all over the country, all over the world. They're saying, I want to be here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. So we've kind of talked about the luncheon that Senator Neal and Senator Givens attended a few weeks ago. That's the executive luncheon series that the Kentucky Center for Leadership has, like once a quarter or something like that.
We have, yeah, exactly. Once a quarter, we've had 4 of those, and we've been doing that for almost 10 years now. I mean, the speakers, my gosh, CEO of Churchill Downs, we've had.
He was fantastic.
Oh my gosh, to their credit,
Coach Helton was a speaker last summer, I think, or last fall, and listening to him, talking about how his father told him, hey, when that opportunity comes, be ready.
Exactly.
You never know when it's going to come, and sometimes you have to make decisions quickly, but be ready.
Exactly.
Be ready to step up.
And Craig Browning, he's led that for several years, and I've heard him say it a couple of days ago with a potential client of ours that we're working with. He described the executive luncheon series as, you would love to have lunch with this person, but you may not know them or have a connection enough to be able to facilitate that luncheon. We want to facilitate a luncheon with you and other colleagues here in South Central Kentucky that you could say, oh my gosh, I just had lunch with her or with him. And that's a great vision. We want to keep it. Our next one's August 1st. And I'm not at liberty to mention who the 2 guests are going to be, but they are very, very impressive, leading a lot of efforts here in the state. And we've got other ones planned. Again, our criterion, if there's just one, I think, is on the edge of your seat.
Yeah.
You can pay for a lunch, you can pay for a training program, but we want the bar to be so high, like the Kentucky Center for Leadership's been doing for the last 10 years. When you walk away, you're like, son of a gun.
Yeah.
That was good.
So how can someone get involved with the Kentucky Center for Leadership or the Executive Luncheon Series?
Great question. On our website is KC4L.org.
Or do it like this, KC4L Live.
Yeah, KC4L Live, and
we're gonna put the link in the show notes.
Good,
okay,
good.
So.
Yeah, go to the website, and the DeCesare Group is responsible for our website. That was another key partner. Is we were doing some website development on our own, and it was okay, it was good, but we realized, listen, we need to have key partners, and one of the key partners, of course, is the DeCesare Group. You all are here, you're local, you have a great team, and we've been extremely thrilled. And that's what we want to do as partners. So you can go to our website and take a look at our mission, our vision. There's also on the contact page, we love your feedback because we do not want to work in a vacuum.
No.
And we have some, I hate to call them off-the-shelf programming. I call it, ready to serve. But, conflict resolution, leadership development, change management. We have a lot of the programming that a lot of folks ask for. We have that. But everything we do, we want to create an experience, and we want to be customized to your organization. And without you going on our website and telling us what do you need, we had an organization that after the luncheon went on our website and told us they wanted something around values. And what I'm seeing right now, Jim, is most organizations have a mission and a vision. They have values. I mean, you can't exist without values. But they're not articulated. They're not on the website. They're not talking to employees. And research shows that the newer generation are more motivated and inspired by your values, the why that Simon Sinek talks about, than your mission and vision.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking to organizations about, why would you put your values? Well, we've got them, but we haven't. Well, what are they? So as a result of that luncheon, we had an organization, a manufacturing client, that now we're working with them on value creation. They've already got them. How do you do that? So they went on the website, like hopefully your listeners will, on the contact page, and the comments is to tell us, what can we do for you?
Yeah.
What's your one thing that, as a result of that luncheon also, we had a CEO that approached me and said, Greg, as a CEO, here's what you can do for me that I need. And that's a CEO roundtable. And a lot of organizations, or a lot of big cities, have what they call Vistage.
Yeah.
And Vistage is basically a consultant, somewhat probably like me. Bowling Green, I don't think, has a Vistage yet. Well, they don't have to, because the Kentucky Center for Leadership is creating a CEO roundtable, where once a month, these CEOs, maybe 8 to 10 from different industries, will get together. And it's a little bit of content, maybe from me, just maybe 30 minutes worth, sort of the soup du jour. But most of the discussion for the next 2 or 3 hours are issues that are relevant to them.
Right.
Extremely confidential. And that's why we're going to have maybe maybe one manufacturer, one person from healthcare, one from banking, et cetera. Yep. But that CEO said, that's what the Kentucky Center for Leadership can do for me. So guess what? We've met with him, and we're in the process of not only starting a CEO roundtable, we would like to start a roundtable for younger entrepreneurs, like, for instance, my son, who has an insurance agency, and Justin and other ones. We'd like to be able to start a roundtable for those.
It's a Little Coker State Farm.
Little Coker State Farm. And as soon as I said that, this particular CEO said, we'll fund it. And I said, what? He goes, the CEO roundtable, because we're seasoned, we have the money. Don't charge the smaller roundtable. The larger CEO roundtable will fund the cost. I went, that's brilliant. Because my friend Dave Chandler a couple years ago always asked, what are you doing, Greg, to help the future leaders of Bowling Green, South Central Kentucky? Yeah. And that is a key question, is what are we doing? So we want to pass that torch, pass that baton. So those are the things that you can go to our website and tell us, what do you need? We want to customize that programming.
That's awesome. And and it could be as simple as, hey, I want to create a CEO roundtable. All right, done, fund it. Exactly. We got it.
It's in the works.
That's good to know, because there are a lot of people and a lot of organizations, and one of the things that you sort of hit on but didn't say it is culture within an organization. And I read a story maybe this morning. I can't remember. I want to say it was in the Wall Street Journal, but don't quote me on that. But it was talking about how a lot of these firms, these organizations now, they're hiring the fun guy. They want a fun guy or fun gal working in the office, someone that has a personality. Because you get in a lot of situations where everybody's kind of focused on what they're doing, and there's no camaraderie in the office.
Exactly.
And you've got to have that dynamic of teamwork and working together and collaboration. And usually it takes one person with that personality, a Greg Coker or a Jim DeCesare, someone that's a little outgoing, to get everybody motivated and geared up and ready to, roll up their sleeves and get the job done. But also, in anything you do in life, you should enjoy it.
Amen. And an employee decides in the first 48 hours if they're going to stay with your company or not.
Yeah.
And orientation, Gone are the days where it's, Greg, welcome, you're going to do great. I've got to be in Louisville in a couple hours. If you need something, Justin will take care of you. See you next week. And next week rarely happens. We have to be so much more intentional on how we orient employees.
And you've talked on this podcast about the John Deere story, I think.
John Deere story. They're intentional of how that happens. They don't leave it to chance. But your point on the culture, as soon as I walk in, not as an employee, when I walk into the DeCesare Group, this place has a feel. It has a smell, a good smell. It has coffee. The people, it just feels good. It's a culture. It's a spirit. And I met with a client this morning at Spencer's, and he's new in town. And he said, I'd been asked to come to Bowling Green. I had a good job up in this area. I'd said no probably 10 times, this particular CEO. He said, but I go to the White Squirrel, and I have a beer with a couple of folks.
Which, by the way, July 20th, disorderly conduct will be playing at the White Squirrel.
We're going. And White Squirrel, to Brian Medford, talk about a leader. But Brian Medford and Sean and those guys have created a culture, a spirit. And this gentleman told me, he said, what sold me on Bowling Green and coming to work for this organization is I met some folks at White Squirrel, and I go back to my wife and I say, there's something in Bowling Green that I want to be a part of. And what the judge is doing, and the mayor and the council, and at the chamber coffee 3-4 weeks ago, when Judge Gorman put that slide up of the family having Thanksgiving, he said, Michelle,
the food fight.
The food. He goes, Michelle and I have Thanksgiving. If we invite you to have Thanksgiving dinner with us, you would come and you would enjoy it, and you would like our family, we'd like your family. Then he put a slide up. He said, but if you came to our house and we had a food fight and people were arguing, you would never want to come back. Mm-hmm. And it was beautiful. Yeah. He said, this is Bowling Green. When you come to Bowling Green, not that picture, but when you come to Bowling Green, we get along.
It's the Norman Rockwell.
It's the Norman Rockwell. And people want to come back. And this gentleman, this morning over coffee at Spencer's, downtown, said this place, he's been here now, I think, 9 weeks.
I think I know who you're talking about, too.
Yeah, this place has a feel, has a spirit. And I literally got watery. I was thinking about it. I'm like, it does.
Yeah.
It has a feel. And what we want to do is, and part of next level leadership, a big part, is how do you create that feel in your organization? How do you create that feel in Bowling Green or in Owensboro or Paducah or Kentucky or anywhere you are, Tennessee? Mm-hmm. How do you create that? Managers are so focused on the bottom line and running the organization, which is admirable. You've got to do that. You couldn't lead without management. The leader is the one saying, how can we make this place feel good? And friends like you're talking about to be able to have a good time.
Yeah. All right. So you got something big coming up in September. Tell us about it.
We do. We have a fall leadership summit. And that was the vision that the board had, and quite frankly I had too, is how do we introduce people to the Kentucky Center for Leadership? The executive luncheon series, to, again, the board's credit in the organization, we've been doing that for a while. The 3 weeks ago, we continued, and we hopefully knocked it out of the park, not because of us. We just create the experience. We create the atmosphere. But in September 26th and 27th, from noon to noon, that's a Thursday from noon to Friday to noon, at the Innovation Campus. The Kentucky Center for Leadership is spearheading and hosting what we're calling next level leadership, but we've got two key partners. We've got the Innovation Campus and we have the Technology Council. Mm-hmm. And the location is going to be at the Innovation Campus. We're expecting big things. I emailed a speaker. I will tell you, this speaker is in Germany, but is on his way home and is a very high level leader, and confirmed to me this morning that he will be there in September.
All right.
And I want to pinch myself, so I'm hesitant to say, I asked him 3 or 4 times, but we will be announcing that soon. Very high level. You don't want to
make a special announcement right here, right now?
I would like to. We'll do that a little bit later on. And then we're also looking at a couple of C-suite leaders as well. But our vision is we would have 2 or 3 speakers, more of a panel. Because one thing that a couple folks told us about the executive luncheon last week is there were two people up there. It felt like a podcast. Felt like a DeCesare podcast. It was conversational. So we want to recreate that. So not someone just standing behind a podium and saying, I'm a speaker and you're the listener. No, we want to create an experience, but also have some breakouts. So maybe a faith-based group could go and talk about how do we do next-level leadership in the faith-based community. Healthcare could go over here. Higher education with
logistics, healthcare, all the different sectors. Yeah,
exactly. But that's September 26th and 27th. More information to come. So be looking for that email on the Executive Luncheon Series on August 1st, and then in September 26th and 27th on the Fall Leadership.
And we'll share that in our newsletter.
Thank you.
As well. And a lot of people who listen to the podcast and now watch us on YouTube
awesome.
Are getting the newsletter. So I leave anything out? I
don't think so. We're excited. Can't tell you how much I would pay homage to the Kentucky Center for Leadership board, those that have supported the organization way before I got involved. I was involved as a patron. There's two ways you can get involved. You can help us out through, we're a nonprofit, and we want to make sure we do the nonprofit work, and we work in school systems and in governments, et cetera. So you can support us that way, but you can also be a member of our Executive Luncheon Series.
Yeah.
And it's $200 for the rest of the year, and that gets you 3 more lunches.
Yeah.
So that if nothing else, it's a lunch and being able to have lunch with a high-level C-suite leader, and go to the KC4L.org. I know you're going to put it on your website or on your podcast, but visit us there, and you can join our Executive Luncheon Series, and stay tuned for information about the summit.
Well, congratulations on the new role. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
And thanks for being on the DeCesare Group Podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks again to Greg Coker, President and CEO of the Kentucky Center for Leadership, for joining us on the DeCesare Group Podcast. And thank you for checking us out. Hey, if you want to learn more about the Kentucky Center for Leadership, visit their website, KC4L.org. I'll share the link in the show notes. And if you like the TDG Podcast, share it with a friend. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and check us out on YouTube. Leave us a review and share your feedback with us. You can also follow the DeCesare Group across all of our social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and X. The DeCesare Group Podcast is a companion to our newsletter, Soki Economic Development and Business News, where you can subscribe to it on our website, thedecesaregroup.com. It'll hit your inbox every Monday morning. The DeCesare Group Podcast is produced by the DeCesare Group, a full-service public relations and consulting firm based in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Our engineer and president of the Greg Coker Fan Club is Justin DeCesare, with content contributions from Brooke Mattingly and Amy DeCesare. I'm Jim DeCesare, and join us again next time for the DeCesare Group Podcast.